Hi Suresh, thank you very much for taking part in the Business Spotlight series. I'm going to hand it straight across to you to introduce yourself and what you do.
Hi, Ed. Thank you. So, look, I'm Suresh Vaghjiani. I'm CEO of a company called CLOWD9. We basically provide the technology in the issuing side of the industry. So, it's kind of the technology that sits behind debit cards, credit cards, that kind of space.
Okay, fantastic. So tell me a bit more about that as someone who doesn't know a lot about that side of it. So tell me a bit more actually what you do.
So, what a lot of people don't realize is when you actually use a card to make a payment, there are a number of entities that sit within that transaction. And what happens is, what people don't realize is when you actually make the payment, the money doesn't come to the merchant straight away. It often arrives the following day, or maybe even on most occasions, a week or 3 days later, or 5 days later, or sometimes even 2 weeks later. But at the point of transaction, when you put your card in the machine, it has to go somewhere to say, is this card genuine? Is the card being cloned? Is there enough money on this card? Are they allowed to do this transaction? And there's a technology that sits behind that. And that's kind of what we do, something called issuer processing.
Okay, fantastic. And that gives me more idea. And in terms of what you do that's sort of different to other similar companies or companies who also handle that issue side of payments. Um,
So look, this area, when people say processing, they often think of the acquiring side, and the acquiring side is I kind of refer to acquiring as accepting payments and issuing as making payments, and there hasn't been a lot of innovation in this side. When you see uh, a lot of the innovation you've seen today, it's often been on the front end. Great apps, great user experience, all of these things. But when it comes to things like the infrastructure that sits behind it, like it has not innovated. Some of these tech companies that provide this platform uh, and the way that it works actually was there before the internet existed, and that puts things in perspective. So there hasn't been a lot of innovation in that space. What we've done is we've re-looked at the whole the kind of the architecture of how it works, and we've actually built everything into a public cloud environment, into AWS. So we're the first processor in the world to connect to Visa and Mastercard's cloud endpoints, where historically you'd always have a physical data center connecting to Visa and Mastercard, where they will, in principle, have one of their servers hosted in your environment. So what we've done is kind of like taken it to the whole next kind of, I don't want to use the cliche of next generation, but that's kind of what it is.
okay, excellent. So you mentioned Visa and Mastercard there. Who's the sort of typical organization who uses your service?
Look, I think that one of the things is that when you provide this type of technology, I would say no two clients are ever the same. We'll be talking to somebody that wants to build a bank in the metaverse, and they're planning to do something pretty groundbreaking. And then next minute, you're talking to somebody that wants to do payroll, or somebody that wants to do, I don't know, like a company expenses product, right? So no two clients are ever the same.
Hmm.
And it's funny because people often refer to payments can be seen as quite dull and boring. It's kind of like it's the final stage of a transaction where you're choosing to buy something or not. But there's so much innovation in this space, right? Like when you think of Apple Pay, when you think about wearables, when you think of Fitbit Pay, there's so much innovation and there's so many things happening that people are unaware of. So, you know, making payments on your mobile phone, like people could argue that the innovation when you use Uber, which is, it's seamless. You go on a trip, you get in the car, you get out of the car, you don't worry about it, and everything's taken care of. But what actually makes the experience very nice for the end customer is the whole payments journey.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think I guess also from a business side as well, the less you have friction, unless you have challenges around payment, you make it easier for people to pay. It's good for business too.
Yeah, I think it's one of those that, and what's the interesting point about friction is that customers don't mind friction as long as it's the right friction depending on what they're doing. So like if you're buying a cup of coffee, you want as least friction as possible. If you're jumping in a taxi, you want it to be as easy as possible because it's a pretty stressful moment anyway. However, if you're purchasing a house and there's processes you have to do, customers want more friction because it gives them reassurances.
Yeah, really interesting. Good point. So tell me a bit more about where you see the company going in the next 5 years.
So we've been building in stealth for over 2 years. We only came out of stealth in October. One thing we've seen is the demand for the service. So probably one other point to emphasize is that historically, every issue or processor in the space has always been bound by a region. And it's to do with more from a technology limitation rather than anything else. We've built this solution where we have multiple instances of our platform around the world that replicate in real time. So we're in California, we're in Virginia, we're in London, we're in Frankfurt, we're in Singapore. It allows us to have this global footprint unlike anybody else. And what we're seeing is massive demand for our product. Although we've been in stealth for so long and most people had never heard of us, the demand for the product has been phenomenal. So what do I see happening in the next 3 to 5 years? I see us going into territories that are totally untapped by payments because historically, there was limitations from a technology perspective to go there and do things in that region, whether that's Latin America, whether that's Africa. But we see real innovation happening in these territories that are going to leapfrog I call it the copper wires that we have in Western Europe. They're going to go straight to mobile point of sales and really innovating in ways that we haven't seen before.
Sounds great. Sounds really interesting. It's really exciting. So, obviously, you mentioned there the sort of international element to it. Is there any impact of what's happened the last few years with COVID on the business?
Well, I mean, the company was born during COVID, so it was very from the outset. It was very much a remote working company. I mean, we're nearly 50 people now. Now it comes with its own challenges. I think that it's quite hard to create a culture when people are working remotely. So we had to actively put processes in place to kind of build the culture around the company. So I'll give you an example. One of the things we do on a Friday morning where the whole company jumps on a call, we call it brew with the crew, right? It's in the diary as brew with the crew. And it's supposed to simulate conversations you'd have around a photocopier if you were in the office. So it's actually the main point is to not talk about work. It's to talk about what people are doing on their weekends, what they've got planned. And if it's a video call, which it usually is, we tell people the wallpaper in the background represents what's on their mind at this present moment in time. So it's actually very interactive. It's quite fun. We continue doing it now because it was very successful. From a sector perspective, digital payments kind of grew exponentially during COVID. So we're in the right space at the right time.
Yeah.
So from a sector perspective, phenomenal. From a company growing perspective, I think you have to manage it in a certain way.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, it's great always to hear about how people do it differently and how people manage that remote world. And I suppose on the other side of it then, what would you see as the challenges for the business moving forward?
Look, I think the key thing here is that, so one of the things I forgot to mention to you is although we're a company of nearly 50, half the people come from a payments experience background and half of them don't. And we've done that intentionally so that we innovate. Because if everybody comes from the same background, you tend to have the same views, you build things in the same way. So it was done in a way to really kind of keep innovating and questioning why we do things and why we do it in a certain way. What I would say is that it's sometimes quite hard to find the right people. And it sounds really crazy, but it's like there's people that have amazing CVs, amazing experience, but there's a specific mindset we're looking for, which is very much from a learning hunger perspective. And sometimes when people have been in the industry long enough, they kind of tend to lose that because they feel like, well, this is the way we do things. This is the way we've always done things. So it's this mix between curiosity, innovation, questioning things, but also being grounded in the right way. So it's more like hiring the right characters.
Yeah, definitely. Excuse me, makes sense. And again, that sounds like there's lots of reflection and sort of deep thought goes into different things. What would you say has been the biggest learning you've had as a business owner?
Look, I think that this is in many ways my third startup. Others that I've done have gone on and still continue to do extremely well, and some of them are close to unicorn status now. So kind of very proud of all of those achievements. What I would say is that my only learning is that the moment that you stop learning is the moment you start declining. The moment you feel like you know it all, the moment you feel like you're not open to learning new things, that's when you're going to decline. And the only reason I feel like I've been able to do a third startup is that in every opportunity I've tried to reinvent myself with new knowledge and new learning, and try to not make the same mistakes as before to come back stronger. And then I guess the other final point is probably that is to do things that make you happy. People forget that, but if you're in a company that's growing quickly, people tend to not celebrate the small wins, and you sometimes get frustrated on something that's not happening, and you've got to take a step back and not look at your day or your week, but look at your month or your year, and you sit there and take a step back and say, wow, I've achieved all of that in 1 month. That's unbelievable. But when you look at it from a week perspective or a day perspective, it's very easy to be frustrated. So I guess it's the analogy that you can't see the wood from the trees. So it's very easy to be frustrated in the short term, when in the long term you realize how much you've achieved. And I think a lot of people don't always know how to take a step back because they're too in the weeds.
Yeah, two excellent pieces of advice. We have a saying here as well of, you're not allowed to say I know because it's too much dangerous words. So definitely can relate to that. And then, obviously you mentioned there that you always strive to keep learning. So what is it that inspires you to do that?
I think, look, I think that we work in the payment space that's quite complex, right? And when things go wrong, they can go badly wrong, right? Because you are talking about money, and there's not many more topics more serious than money, maybe health, but people focus more on money on a day-to-day basis. And what we do is from a technology perspective, but everything we do is under regulations of banks and regulated entities. So the moment you think you know it, there's a new legislation, a new regulation coming out. And if you don't get the information correct, these things can really bite you financially, kind of reputationally. So it's very easy to just take a step back and say, you know what I know is enough, but you will end up with the company growing around you. And if you want to be growing with the company, you need to be on top of these things. And the only other point I'd also say is that always hire people that are better than you. A lot of people don't, but I'm a big avid fan of hiring people that are better than you, because ultimately they're a representation of you.
Brilliant. Yeah, some really great advice there. Thank you for that. And look, as a final thing, is there any news or any offer that you'd like to extend to the audience?
Look, what I'd say is that we are a very experienced team. We've literally delivered some of the most like many fintechs that you see in the market, whether it's, I don't know, Revolut or Monzo, Starling, right? we are a team that delivered that, not in this company, but in previous capacity, we've done these things. And we like companies that are innovative and push boundaries. And I would say that anybody that wants to do something different in that issuing space, speak to us, because we've done some amazing projects, from things like payment cards that double up as football season tickets, to doing contactless in a bottle. Like we did a promotion with Lucozade, for example, where they were making contactless payments using a bottle, because it was a promotion where they were giving it out in the underground and saying Lucozade gets you home. So it's endless, right? And I actually like the more obscure ones because it challenges us. So there was a project that never happened where we were looking at putting contactless in makeup. And this particular makeup company said that their data shows that they're more likely to carry their makeup than they are to carry their purse. Whether we agree or disagree, that's a separate question, but we were putting things in place in order for us to do that. So there is great opportunity, and I'm saying that any clients that want to really revolutionize and do something different, in the ability to launch a neobank or a fintech or a card product or a salary product or a payroll product or a parent-child proposition, insurance payout. It's endless. Like, I would love to hear from you. What I would say is that we don't have a rate card. We look at every client, especially startups that don't always have endless pots of money. We try to position it in a way that as they grow, we grow. They have the upside, we have the upside. We both make money when it's successful. We try to not take all this money up front, knowing that they need that to get their product, market it, and get it live and out there.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm glad I got that last one in then. So it's been really good to find out about what you do. It's certainly different, and you can hear the potential for innovation and growth into new markets. So look forward to seeing what happens in the coming months and years ahead.
Great. Thank you for having me on here.